Okay, I think we can start as we are running already a little bit late. And it is a great honor to introduce Professor Jerome Tessuto, who is a full professor of English linguistics and translation at the Department of Precision Medicine of the University of Campania, Luigi Vanvitelli, where is also director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Language and Medicine, formerly Center for Research in Language and Law. Besides memberships of several academic and professional associations, he is editorial board member of various international English linguistics journals and chief editor of the Medical Discourse and Communication internationally peer-reviewed series published by Cambridge scholars in the UK. His research interests focus primarily on critical discourse analysis of academic, professional, and institutional genres in medical, healthcare, and legal contexts. English for specific purposes, English for academic purposes, and specialized translation. His published academic work comprises research monographs and several different publications appearing as research articles, book chapters, co-edited volumes and series, and book reviews. He has endorsed the volumes The Ashgate Handbook of Legal Translation, 2015, and Critical Genre Analysis, Investigating Interdiscursive Performers in Professional Practice in 2017. I mean, his list of publication is so long that I think we can stop here. So I give the floor and I thank my esteemed colleague, Jerome Tessuto. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks very much. Can you hear me well? Yes. Right. Just first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. And it's really a pleasure and honor for me to be at this conference in Parma. Can you hear me well? Yes.
Can you just chat?
Otherwise, I'll, yeah. Now, can you hear me well now? Yeah. Can you? Yeah. Okay.
Let's try. Otherwise, shall I?
Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna use. I'll try this one a little more. Yeah. So just yeah, I can. Yeah, that's fine. So just thanks very much again, and thanks very much to the whole organizing committee, and of course my colleague Michela Canepari for this opportunity to share my research today. And my colleague Professor Bondi has already amply covered the topic of knowledge communication, and I'm going to, you know, just present my own data and perspective as well. But I'd like to think that the topics that we are now dealing with today can and do have an impact on medical communication within this wall and outside this wall. And I hope that my contribution will play a part in this. So before getting down to the nitty-gritty of my talk, let me just give you an outline of what lies behind my topic today. Basically, I'll be looking very quickly into what we mean by science communication and how it relates to medical science journalism, more particularly how these two fields stand in relation to science popularization, and then move on very quickly onto presenting my own data and see what sort of strategies medical journalists are actually adopting in popular news media sites when they're trying to reach out to the public. And that's the main target of my research and what I'm trying to do now. Right. Defining the concept of science communication is not as straightforward as it would first appear, because it is a generic and not a universal term. That is immediately apparent when Burns and colleagues, for example, say that the definition of science communication has been plagued by an unfortunate lack of clarity, with the concept sharing considerable commonality with terms like public awareness of science, public understanding of science, and so on. Davis, on his side, views science communication as organized processes that seek to engage lay publics with scientific knowledge, whereas Palmer and Shibechi think of science communication in terms of fourfold categorization, where type 1, professional science, is basically expert to expert, yeah? Type 2 deficit is about expert to lay knowledge exchange. Type 3, what they call consultative, is a sort of bilateral process of knowledge exchange between experts and none, while type 4 comprises what are essentially more democratic and deliberative aspects of science communication. Sorry, but it can't move. All right, yeah, that's fine. But it is particularly this definition given by Shibechi that brings us around to the major current trend in the field, where science communication is actually kind of bustling around the notion of communication practices that should be more inclusive. And that's why we now see strategic goals of science communication gradually shifting from top-down or deficit model thinking to more kind of focus on dialogue, public engagement, and public participation in science models. And the reason why one-way or deficit model is now put under strain is because of a perceived need for science literacy, if you like, where the public is actually viewed as being deficient about scientific knowledge, and that, and that public lack of understanding of science leads to the public being skeptical about science. And of course, there are some who argue that deficit style communication can still live side by side with dialogue style activities. But debates are still continuing around the fundamental nature of the medialization of science, and Bucha and Wingert describe medialization as a mutually beneficial relationship between science, the media, and society, where engagement and participation activities are still involved. Whereas Briggs and Hallin, for example, talk about biomediatization, where biomedical discourses and news discourses are now deeply intertwined via different channels. But that's not the end of the story, because there are clear incentives for news media medical organizations to actually generate newsworthy stories that ultimately drive a perspective in original and impactful ways. And we're not even surprised that linguistic literature on news value has also largely included the notion of relevance as just one value among many. And so, while a huge number of journalists are now striving for authoritative and current information, journalists are often caught between two seemingly contradictory discourses. One made up of objectivity discourse, and the second one made up of affective, overtly affective discourse. And both are designed to find a hook or a story angle, if you like. Story angle, often by exaggerating or sensationalizing relevance or novelty of research work, we essentially find ourselves into the realm of scientific hype across a variety of medical fields and, of course, genres, including popular science journalism. But why is hype so prolific there is because of a variety of factors, including pressures from the publish or perish culture, intense commercialization agenda of media outlets, and of course the need to gain public attention for news that gets told. But evidence suggests that the gap between science and media is also now pretty much closed, simply because higher visibility in the media goes a long way to securing and promoting evidentiary or evidence-based research. So what do we mean by hype? One definition is about the use of promotional, hyperbolic, and dramatic language to glamorize, embellish, or exaggerate aspects of medical scientific research. And it is no accident that this kind of phenomenon also comes through in recent studies on medical research writing, including my own. Now, putting all these things together, a medialization discourse by medical science journalists is not only important to move informative news of biomedical research into the public domain, but also harness the potential of a one-way dissemination model of public communication, where despite criticism, the central activity there becomes transmission or relay of a particular idea or result from the scientific community to large and diverse audiences. And this model implies seeing a complex set of recontextualization strategies in discourse studies and popularization discourse itself. And Meyer's definition of popularization, I think, is still worth mentioning here, as his point about scientific and popularized discourse being on the same spectrum. In addition to Carl Familia and Van Dijk, viewing popularization as providing lay versions of scientific knowledge, or stripping scientific discourse of more forbidding rhetorical features, as Hyland would have it. Of course, much has been said about recontextualization for popularization purposes, so I won't dig into that, except for saying, as Bondi and colleagues argue, it is a process by which some part of discourse is extracted from one communicative context and conveyed into another. So like an expert context going to a lay context, which means allowing non-specialists to make sense of specialized knowledge, or moving meaning from here to there in what Bessemer and Kress call multimodal recontextualization. And some of these recontextualization strategies may be something like definitions, metaphors, or forms of code glosses to bridge potential knowledge asymmetries, where, as I noted elsewhere in medical science communication, when activated successfully, these strategies may well increase boundary permeability for scientific knowledge transfer. And this is where my study comes in. Basically, a qualitative and quantitative discourse analysis of popular news media reporting on health and medical issues, essentially trying to see how and to what extent news writers as popularizers or active communicators of new scientific knowledge are now using recontextualization strategies to recover the voice of biomedical researchers and disseminate their research to the public. And so possibly creating newsworthy content to engage audiences in a proper one-way process of. Right. For my sampling, I chose 50 news articles from Medical News Today and 50 from News Medical, where essentially in-house medical journalists were trying to break down medical and life science information for a broader or reasonably informed audience, yeah, while still being reviewed by a panel of experts. Structurally speaking, all articles were a snapshot of research articles that were published in medical journals, where writers essentially reported and evaluated the latest advances in medical science for this particular audience. So there you can see the kind of corpus that I built up, essentially coming up with over 100,000 running tokens in news articles that were posted over those sites. Now, to pick out the main rhetorical strategies for recontextualizing the source articles, I used a blend, but also modified theoretical frameworks, yeah, considering initially that news articles were a synopsis of newly published scholarly outputs. So just like any piece of news that prioritizes information in a very succinct, structured format, immediate reference was to Nugu on schematic news structure, alongside Bell on health and medical news story structure. Of course, I did not use the term rhetorical move, my analysis, but I just considered what Nugu calls journalistic reported versions, where information is essentially arranged in a move sequence order via the structural component of lead, that is part of the inverted pyramid style of reporting, where I'm sure you're familiar with, most relevant and newsworthy information comes at the top. But this way of prioritizing information in the pyramid style was also very much reflected in how news writers locate themselves to the material presented, and also the relations managed there. And this dual focus is now apparent in highly influential framework of proximity. So to introduce my own analytical framework, I selected just some of the interpersonal features of language that fall into the stance engagement systems and fit them onto a theoretical background that considers recontextualization strategies in science and popularization discourse, particularly Luzon study dealing with interactional discourse features in research blog science, where they are labeled strategies to tailor information and strategies to engage the reader, with Luzon herself also drawing upon Highland study of proximity. Naturally, my framework included only some of these strategies discussed in cited study, and I often relabeled them for inclusion in proper rubrics, like enhancing comprehensibility, instead of strategies to tailor information to reader, or made some addition of my own, like the rubric arranging scientific content in the global news item structure. In the same way, some strategies mentioned in her study, like humor, were not found compatible with my case, so they were left out. When it comes to specific strategies for rewarding or clarifying text material, I also consider the reformulations and exemplifications for their own functions in Highland taxonomy, alongside 3 units of exemplification constructions and cases of definitions in treaty studies, and similarly definitional cases where there is no explicit lexical signals as suggested by others. So I opted for manually coding strategies, essentially counting the number of articles where they occurred rather than the number of times they occurred across the whole corpus, and then sorted them out for corresponding rubrics. I now have to be quite harsh on myself, so I just gave you very essential sort of way things are in the most important, regions of recontextualization strategies. All right, following my coding scheme, I came up with a total of 5 rubrics, like those labeled as arranging global news item structure or establishing credibility, and sorted 19 recontextualizations in each text. If we look at these strategies for each rubric, we'll see that all articles set priority to newsworthiness, announce the new finding, describe and evaluated methods, presented and explained main research outcomes, while just less than half of articles opted to front load with layers of background or context in that global news item rubric. All articles made use of code glosses, hyperlinks, and visuals in the comprehensibility rubric, with only half opting for lifestyle routines. Source quoting and links to published articles were present in all samples, while only 1 in 4 articles cited additional sources from published articles to establish credibility. When it comes to strategies for expressing stance, all of the articles made use different kinds of evaluative commentary, like those attributing degrees of reliability to arguments or elevating the news value of the study, while strategies for eliciting engagement relied mostly on titles and questions, with reader and inclusive pronouns coming along the way. Of course, code glosses, stance features, or other strategies made their appearance here and there across the global news item structure, where the core phenomenon, the core mechanism of re-genring scientific content or scientific content of the article was naturally in play. So what does this framework tell us about these strategies that were injected into a proper one-way dissemination model of public communication? Right, let's tap it into the global news item structure, where we can have some general idea of credibility strategies as well. Right, given the large amount of information that comes through a newly published scientific study, writers had to decide how best to organize the original material and adjust the rhetorical structure to a new context. And so in this very process, initial summary leads opening up front in all news articles set reader expectations for the global news item structure that follows. And so 1 or 2 sentences for lead pertaining to the macro proposition of the text are now readily apparent in these examples, where writers, very possibly with the current news science bit, if you like, are now stimulating receptivity to earlier studies that are presented as a cutting-edge discovery on emerging or even very controversial frontier science, like example 1, reporting on decisive steps towards early diagnosis of Parkinson, and making relevant, timely, and also inherently newsworthy for the public. And so signifying that the quicker a new relevant story breaks into these leads, the more likely it is to dominate the corresponding titles that we see there. But as I've shown in this much longer text, designing a a self-contained news summary lead was not a standard practice, simply because nearly half of the writers liked having some general context deployed for topic generalization in one or three short sentences before an indirect question lead that raised an hypothesis for an intriguing inquiry. And thereafter, they elaborated on the lead to provide supportive details by describing method and announcing findings. So here we find this writer selectively synthesizing newsworthy information in what is essentially a reveal lead. Yeah, a reveal lead that essentially recontextualizes what has gone before in terms of study findings. And he seems to be doing so by announcing what seemed to be relentless advancement that biomedical science is now set to produce in Alzheimer's disease. But because this writer is filtering for the most critical quotes and prioritize the most important informational source, he's also aiming for impartiality and authenticities of news text and enhance reader engagement with the text. But quote selection here has still another function to play. If we take a direct quotes for key aspects. And so quoting allows the writer to lend support for the author perspective or his role or position within a leading, a thriving research lab. I mean, someone who's now strategically selected for his source personality and credibility in the field, and of course, is best fit for the story angle, for a particular story angle and relevance. But of course, source credibility here is also most easily gained on the strength of positively evaluated findings that were obtained by the research team in their preclinical studies on Alzheimer. So, I mean, signifying that readers can only perceive the utility of this of their study when it demonstrates validity of those findings. And so, in this case, restoring brain energy balance in Alzheimer's disease, and how this positive evaluation can actually draw readers into a very kind of human element of the story in the recontextualized text. But as part of this new structure, writers were also keen to adapt medical science content to the assumed knowledge base of potential readers. So a variety of textual strategies were used to that particular effect. And again, this table provides just a breakdown of these strategies, showing that code glosses, visuals, and hyperlinks were a constant feature in all the articles, with lifestyle routines and call to actions essentially trailing behind. So going down to glossing usage, I came across more than 200 instances of code glosses throughout, accounting for an average 4 instances per article. And this table shows that writers use roughly 15% more exemplification markers than reformulations across the samples. And these numbers clearly mean identifying code glosses for those points where readers required guidance for text interpretation. So glossing played a crucial role in rewarding, explaining, or clarifying the sense of medical usage for a non-expert audience. So just to give you a taste of this, here we can see some of the expansion uses, yeah? With the writing example 6, expanding on the meaning of a previous unit, in this case clarifying the biochemistry concept of arginine that follows in the adjacent or explainer clause, therefore relying on his assessment of the reader knowledge to help them grasp the intended meaning behind that particular usage. That was obviously found in the original article. Or even example 10, providing a summary or a conclusion of what was previously expressed about DNA living cells, and so making sense to the current recipient. Or in the case of exemplifications here, different patterns were used to provide concrete examples in support of concepts or arguments coming inside the previous unit, in the same way as there are 3 compulsory discourse units in any form of exemplification here, like 18, example 18, where we can appreciate the prior grammatical unit to be exemplified, I mean clarified or reformulated in the part I have marked in red, followed by the exemplifier glossing in boldface, and the exemplification or reformulation part in italicized pink. So sharing the same function of referencing or directing the evolving text towards a potential audience. And these cases obviously combined with instances where exemplifications follow a single sentence pattern of a term, phrase, and a positive noun phrase to provide definitions of terms. So putting an immediate gloss on complex concepts like sensory loss or neurological conditions essentially shows the points where writers considered their audience and what they might know about these topics that possibly were most pertinent to that medical and health experience. These ways of distilling complexity and resonating with reader experiences goes alongside other strategies designed to handle technical jargon through dominant strategy of syntax integrated hyperlinks appearing in all articles. What I mean by that, hyperlink technical terms were defined for their related concept in cases where glosses were missing out from the writer's own text. And this example shows that it was common practice to connect complex terms like glioblastoma directing this kind of term to simple explanations or definitions in a separate glossary. In other words, creating interactive or user-friendly documentation and ultimately holding value when tracking complex ideas head-on. The fourth rubric of my framework sees stance features reorganizing various bits and pieces of scientific content. And again, this table shows that these features were present in all the samples. And I came across almost 700 instances of stance markers throughout the corpus, where they averaged 6.83% per article. So demonstrating the importance writers attach to forming opinion and the attitude about the scholarly source of information and establishing proximity. More precisely about these frequency counts, we see that affect markers are the most popular choice overall, accounting for almost half of all stance markers, and they are followed by boosters and hedges along the way. With the lower hedging counts, in my case, here, going against the grain with what we normally expect of hedges dominating much of scientific article writing. And I should say that each of my articles contain roughly 5.5 instances of boosters and, and effect. But why this lower distribution of evaluative hedges comes through my data has to do with writer standards of removing doubt as much as possible in favor of statements that either amplified the objectivity, certainty, or significance of the claims by boosters, or express an attitude towards a particular information by effect. So tapping into hedges very quickly, this table shows how these devices work down differently to their linguistic realizations. And particularly example 23, 24, 25 are the most usual cases where writers obviously evaluated the study claims by trading carefully with their propositions. All very well, but in the majority of instances, writers are actually commenting on preliminary, inconclusive, or limited design results of study, like those in example 26, where a conceived counterstructure is now relied upon by by the writer and identify research as compelling evidence prior to understanding the science, the study omitting or failing to report vitamin findings on human samples. But as I mentioned, concerned with strengthening news value stories with evidentiary research and downplay scientific uncertainty and ensure that the information they disseminate from the source is accurate and reliable. So they use more boosters to provide a focus on fact-based news through adherence to certainty, certainty of findings, and enhancing credibility of the information source and their own credibility as well. And this table shows that variously textualized boosting resources are now the response to the writer need to evaluate research material with certainty and create convincing discourse in the recontextualized news. And for this reason, we find writers often relying on a combination of abstract or inanimate evaluative sources and boosters, and occasionally on impersonal pronoun it, to make fact-based news a crucial evidentiary reference point for the public to trust. So drawing on convincing proofs and empirical demonstrations by boosters appears to be the writer's main strategies for three main reasons, as I take it. Firstly, presenting information to an audience who might be curious about the significance of research findings that are now framed as confirmed facts. Secondly, trying to keep up their authority as journalists. And thirdly, understanding the nature of science media interface, where the argument has been made that most medical scientists consider visibility and impact in the media important for promoting scientific findings, and obviously responding to journalistic drive for a compelling newsworthy narrative around evidence. So while this strategy is naturally defined by recontextualizing affordances in media discourse, where claims for scientific knowledge get repackaged while passing through the voice of journalists all the way down to larger audiences, it shows just where both professions, I mean, are driven by largely similar does. Still getting along quite well, as it were, when it comes to driving a research perspective in impactful ways and seeking audience attention. And this is where affect markers essentially function to steer a steady course towards the validity of fact-based research along compelling newsworthy stories. And this table shows the type and frequency of positively marked attitude items realized in various ways for expressing a writer affective perspective towards content and achieving their goals. But more precisely, the range of affect items here suggests just a moderate hyperbole that is about soft buzzwords used to target a value of research in various ways. So, but not only that, because scientific visibility through the utility of media dissemination is now crucial for medical scientists, this range of effect items here shows the many points where writers are also tapping into what is valued by the scientific community. So, an orientation to sidestep sensationalism comes through these cases where writers are targeting the rationale of research models, findings, or the study altogether, and affect items like important or variations thereof essentially signal the writer attitudinal commitment and promote about possible kinds of solutions, treatments, or actions like those in 39, example 39, 42, revolving around the relevance of cell therapies for disease mechanics. So representing scientific evidence is sufficiently great, noteworthy, or important, and attract reader attention to the topics in the news. But this attitudinal commitment also comes through when writers emphasize the immediate use of research or what the study is claimed to do for understanding a particular health problem. And these cases show just how hyping forms are now targeting the tangible benefits or utility of a medical device, like computed tomography scans for different kinds of pathologies, or the benefits of drugs like paracetamol in the area of genetics. So highlighting the state and strength of evidence regarding efficacy or safety, and obviously promoting optimistic views about that. Also, from the conclusion of news item structure, we find instances of hypes targeting the intrinsic quality of the earlier study that is now based on the most reliable indicators of distinction, research distinction, originality, or novelty, with writers using provocative words like breakthrough, in example 50, and create a sense of urgency or drama about that issue. So a higher ratio of hyping words in my data not only indicates how promotional language extends beyond reporting results themselves, but also reveals that research-focused news are the right standards for gauging newsworthiness of the story they write and hype, and obviously repackage in this kind of discourse. I'm just going to stop here for some conclusion. The ways news writers use recontextualizing strategies to bring biomedical research into part of society at large and see their professional duty to disseminate new scientific knowledge to wider audiences. So by relying on a global news item structure, these writers essentially have various opportunities to repurpose scientific discourse for more popular news discourse, and so shifting from a rigid or content-wise format to a more engaging, accessible format to suit a broader audience, all while keeping firmly in mind fidelity to fact-based news for credibility and transparency of their news stories. But I also noted a certain hybridity or mixing of specialized and popular features arising from the writer's need to create a kind of comprehensive, also versatile frame of reference. Complexity of the recontextualization processes themselves. And this mixing is evident where writers transform expert-driven topics into accessible content to re-establish knowledge. And so code glosses, definitions, hyperlinks go some way to adapting and disseminating scientific knowledge. When writers need to maintain a certain uniformity with scientific processes they describe to establish a compelling discourse for evidentiary research, while still managing the tension between the need for accuracy and credibility in specialized discourse and accessibility in popularized discourse. So potential advantage of research and results now see these writers using stance marking resources to display their own awareness and knowledge claims in the source, in the informational source material, as well as their own take. So they are not only reshaping imported material and renegotiating knowledge, but also persuading us about significant findings or effective attitudes towards potential novelty or other values of research, and so representing what is, I mean, the cream of new medical publishing through mild hyperbole. We can't forget the idea of medical science and media frequently overlapping to share mutual interest in promoting medical research and so on. So hyping up values here provides just shifting context where claims about newsworthiness direct readers to emphasize different components for why a story should be considered news, like impact, novelty, timelessness, human interest, proximity, and of course, prominence. In other words, they are deciding which studies they want to cover in the news, and that is based on perception of prestige and credibility of the information resource there. And that's all I have time for. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this extremely interesting, extremely dense presentation that is absolutely relevant to what we are experiencing these days. So it's particularly interesting because it relates to also other forms of digital communication that other speakers will touch upon. So I think we can keep the same organization as last time. So I would call to the table Professor Tenca. Thank you again, Jerome. Thank you very much. And then we have a moment of discussion and questions and answers. Okay. While you do that, I just introduce you. I introduce Professor Tenca, who is okay. Professor Tenca is a temporary assistant professor of English language and translation at the St. Camillus International University of Health and Medical Sciences in Rome. She holds a PhD in human sciences from the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia. Was that me?
I think so.
I think I looked at it far too hard and it just felt, oh, no, I don't want that. Oh, is that one? Okay. Sorry. And between 2015 and 2025, she held positions as adjunct professor in English language and translation in a number of undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs at the University of Padua, Parma, Modena and Reggio Emilia, Verona, and Milan. So she's been traveling all over Italy, but that's the beauty of it, yeah? In 2022, she participated in the project Towards Accessibility and Inclusion in Language Teaching, an effective applicable teaching model with the University of Verona as a postdoctoral researcher. Between 23 and 25, she participated in the project History of Second Language Teaching, a digital archive of ELT materials in Italy at the University of Milan as a postdoctoral researcher. No, I skipped, sorry. They're far too long. Yeah. Her research interests include English language teaching and learning, also from a historical perspective, inclusive and accessible foreign language education, English for specific purposes, of course, and purpose-assisted discourse analysis. Today, she is presenting the paper Humanizing Medical Discourse Through Podcasting, the case of American Medical Association update.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I
Thank
leave you
you.
the floor.
Okay, we try to use this. Okay, so thank you very much for this introduction. Yes. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, I hope it doesn't. Okay. Okay. Today I'm presenting the preliminary result of a pilot study that I'm conducting in the context of medical podcasting, and I will be focusing on the case of the EMA update, one of the podcasts of the American Medical Association. So very quickly, this is what I'm going to talk about. So I will give you some background about podcasting, and I will also touch upon very briefly on the discourse of scientific popularization. I will then illustrate the design of my pilot study, so the aim, and I will give you information about my small-scale corpus and the methodology used to analyze my data. I will illustrate some preliminary findings, and then I will conclude. So podcasting has emerged in the last few years, in the last 2 decades, as a tool for making scientific knowledge more accessible to a variety of audiences, more diverse audiences, lay people, but also experts. And as for health and medical science, podcasts have been studied quite a lot. And the results of these studies, which have been conducted, have highlighted how podcasts can be used to support, foster communication exchange in the medical community itself, so among experts. They're also used for medical education because they have noticed how information which is listened to in a podcast is also better retained. They have conducted these studies also among students of medicine, but also in professional communication. And overall, as regards podcasting targeting lay people, even patients, podcasts are implemented to encourage the public to change their behavior to a more healthy styles. For example, and overall, podcasts have been adopted also by organizations, journals also, because of their affordances. Podcasts are considered as a valuable tool because they help journals, organizations also bypass journalists and media, so they have a better control on the communication, also to avoid risk of misrepresentation and fake news also. They allow for a variety of formats, interviews, monologues, and different styles. And also, they can be also integrated with opportunities to receive feedback from the audience. Now, I will be very brief with this part about popularization, because of course we have already listened to Professor Tessuto and Professor Bondi. So we start from the assumption that science is a social and human activity, and of course medical science is relevant to everybody. Popularization is this cyclical process. It involves different actors, institutions, different levels of authority, and it can be viewed as a continuum which spans from the discourse of scientific popularization, also targeting experts themselves, but also popularized science, which instead is addressed to non-expert audiences. And we have already listened a lot about recontextualization and reformulation in the context of popularization. I will be very brief. We have different strategies, explanation strategies, but also the use also of personalization and also the implementation of personal narratives, which is something that we will see also is adopted in the podcast that I'm going to talk about today, and also the presence of marked lexes. Now, as regards my pilot study, the aim of my research is to investigate how podcasting can bridge this gap, can bring together expert knowledge on the one side, and also improve a public understanding of healthcare issues. And my two research questions, as this is, let's say, a pilot study, a preliminary investigation, I was interested to look at key themes that underlie the discourse of medical podcasting, and then take a look at how these are linguistically constructed. So I adopted a sort of inductive approach to one specific case, which is that of the EMA Update podcast. So this is one of the podcasts, because they have several ghosts. I don't know, maybe somebody at home had the microphone open. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm focusing, no problem, on the AMA update, which is one of the podcasts of the American Medical Associations, which represents physicians in the US. I chose this podcast because it targets, also in the description of the podcast itself, they target medical practitioners, but also medical students and the general audience, so patients. So they have a broad variety of listeners. And I collected all the episodes which were published last year between January and July. And these are 76 episodes. And here are a few figures regarding the size of this small scale corpus that I managed to collect. Okay, methodology which I adopted, I built a corpus and I uploaded it to Sketch Engine, where I used tools such as I started with the frequency word list, and I took a look at the keywords to see which terminology emerged. And then I also looked at the word sketches, and to also better understand the use of these keywords, key phrases, I took a look, of course, at the concordance lines. Now, starting with the frequency word list, what I noticed looking at content words is that the most frequent words have to do with important stakeholders, actors, patients and physicians, which are the two words that I'm going to focus on now. There are other content words which I won't have the time to deal with today, but also words such as health, of course, this is quite obvious, and also work. There are also several I will also consider this aspect of the medical profession later, and also, of course, care. And again, people. So there is a strong focus on the human element. This is communication, as we can see also from the most frequent words, which focuses on people. So this is human-centered communication. And looking at word sketches, this is what I obtained. And I was interested to look at combinations of patients pre-modified by words such as average risk, high risk, and also instead with nouns which are modified by patient, I was interested at looking at patient care. So these are the examples that I'm going to present now. And safety, patient care and patient safety. Now, these are just two examples of this combination: average risk patients and high risk patients. And here we see some also explanations, but also we have already some ideas of some critical issues, current issues, which the AIM Update podcast would like to draw attention to. So this is the importance of each PV self-collection. This is sensitizing the public towards taking screening tests. So this is important, HPV self-collection, and so there is really emphasis on bringing the patients to a level of awareness, so to have a positive impact on their behavior. Instead, in the second example, we have an explanation of the characteristics of a high-risk patient. So they start with the explanation of a low risk is someone who either is peri or early postmenopausal, and a long explanation followed. And then we have the other side of the coin, who are high-risk patients. So this is disseminating information, providing information about high-risk patients. And so this is something which would be typical of popularization discourse in a way. Now, coming to the combinations patient care and patient safety, what we see here is an important key topic, because we have, in example number 1, we talk about issues that challenge physicians. So here we're talking about working conditions of physicians from the point of view of workload, of their mental well-being, and how the issues that they experience actually impact patient care. So the two aspects go hand in hand. And this is a topic which is explored a lot in the podcast episodes. And also using, for example, metaphors such as these issues are seen as obstacles, of course. And along similar lines, in example number 2, healthy physicians mean safer patient care. So again, this focus on the mental well-being of patients, which influences patient safety. And you may remember, indeed, in the frequency word list, this word work was one of the frequent ones, and so this is related in a way to this topic of working conditions for physicians in the US. Okay, let's keep. Okay, the second group of examples to do with physician. I will be looking at this combination with senior, which surprised me at the beginning, but then it is something which is again relating to important words, keywords such as burnout and well-being, physician burnout and physician well-being. So there is a lot of emphasis on this. And in fact, the way in which this senior physician is used, as for example in this example, are again challenges, issues that these professional experience towards the end of their career. And here the focus is on the loneliness that they experience. So again, here they're really targeting a specific group in the audience of the podcast, focusing, addressing really problems that are really current for the medical professional community in the US today. And again, focusing also on the importance, emphasizing the importance. Instead, here we've got examples with physician burnout and physician well-being. And again, underline all those aspects that cause this physician burnout. Structural barriers, for example, that make it harder to practice medicine, and so with a negative impact on patients too. And in the second example here, in fact, we have this, again, correlation which is established between the well-being of physicians and the quality of care that they are able to, of course, provide to patients. Okay, now coming to the keyword list, here what I noticed, you can see words such as Anga, which is the name of the hosts, and also Andrea. This is Andrea Garcia, who is a frequent guest. She's an officer inside EMA, so these are words which are keywords, but what I would like to focus on in my presentation are norovirus and measles especially. I will not talk about RSV because of lack of time, but I will provide some example about, again, burnout. Now, here we have some, let's say, technical terms to do with viruses which caused outbreaks in the US in 2025. So norovirus, here when I looked at the word sketch, I was not really satisfied with the outcome, but I've decided to focus on the combinations with have. So have norovirus because it was curious to see, okay, the individuals who might have norovirus, and then B, to see if I could maybe have some more information about the norovirus itself and how it was presented to the audience. Now, here in the context of the keyword norovirus, both examples provide some personal narrative. So here we have the doctor, the medical professional, the physician, talking about her experience of being pregnant and catching the norovirus. So here we have this personalization of the communication, and also, of course, really sharing the personal experience. And the second example is very similar, as here we have, again, another quick story about the father of the guest whom they tried, of course, to protect from catching the virus, which is very contagious and can cause problems in some parts of the population. Okay, instead, looking at norovirus as a subject, we have some basic information about it as a virus, as you can see in the first example. And this, again, the aim here, looking at the context, is that, again, to sensitize the population, also to for adopting good practices to avoid the virus, which is really contagious. And also we have some figures here which are provided, so some hard data about the norovirus and how contagious it is, again, to sensitize the public, the general public. And again, measles, this was really an issue, at least last year in the US. And indeed, measles outbreak, I was not surprised to find these combinations, considering also the news coming from the US, and also prevent. So this is something that, again, to prevent measles, again, towards sensitizing the public and prone to change behaviors. So what we have here in the first examples, this is about also children dying from measles, and underline the fact that measles is preventable if with vaccination, for example. And the second example, along similar lines, we have also, they address the problem of misinformation about measles. And so here, what is important is to have trusted source of information, as AMA is, and also we have some numerical figures to support the statements. I don't know how am I doing for time. Okay, okay. I think I will come to the maybe conclusions because it's still okay. Just a few words about, again, burnout, which I tackled already in one of the previous slides. So we can see both sides of the communication. A focus on patients, also with a view to promoting positive changes in their habits, but also emphasis on the working conditions of practitioners. And here with burnout, I looked at to reduce burnout and go. So just two examples to conclude. Here, AMA is really working towards improving the situation as regards well-being conditions, mental conditions of practitioners, and because this has an impact also on the quality of care that they can provide. And also they again provide here numerical information, and so AMA is a trusted source of information, is really providing really hard data statistics to support the statements that are made, because maybe something that also the public is not aware of. So I noticed, so these figures. Okay, quickly the conclusions. So as regards the key themes that emerge have to do with patients' health and also issues in public health and also the physicians' mental well-being. And this relates also to the importance of promoting this social knowledge of current issues for 2025 in public health. And with this focus on important actors, what we can see is that the AIM update podcast is humanizing medical discourse, really focusing on very concrete challenges experienced by physicians, and also with a view to, on the other side, to encourage behavioral changes as regards vaccination, and promoting habits, promoting behavior that prevents, for example, getting viruses. And EMA stands out in this case as a trusted information source. And so I think that there is also the hidden agenda here would be also to present AMA as a trusted source of information, promoting themselves as an organization that cares about not only practitioners' working conditions, but in the end, what they can do to really provide good quality of care. As regards the linguistic resources, we've seen just a few explanation strategies, some definitions, the importance of personal narratives and marked lexis. So while keeping physicians informed of the news, also there is the importance on raising the awareness among the public. And of course, the study is just a pilot study, just some preliminary results. The study comes with limitations, but also directions for future research and also some possible implications and applications. What I would like to do now is spend my corpus and, for example, including other podcasts from other organizations to get a more representative sample of medical podcasting and validate the results. Ideally, what I would like to do is also to interview listeners to consider also perceptions of the podcast, how the podcast is used, and for what reasons, and implications. Also, I think that there is also potential for using this material for teaching English for medical purposes. That's all. Thank you very much.
Trying not to. Thank you very much for this very interesting and intriguing presentation. Now, I think we have a little bit of time. We take a little bit of time for discussion and questions. So I invite back Professor Tessuto, and if someone can perhaps manage the little microphone, yeah?
Sorry.
Don't worry. Any questions? Yeah.
My question is to Professor Tessuto. Um, During your lecture, you were talking about writers having to assume and adapt medical science content on an assumed knowledge base.
Yeah.
So my question is, I understand that in terms of something like a Parkinson's disease or a CT scan, a researcher will have an idea or a rough idea of what the assumed knowledge base among the general public is. But in terms of other specific issues where I would say there is a disparity among the researcher and the general public, how would you exactly know what the general consensus among the normal person is?
Right. I think I was quite clear right at the beginning when I said that um, I was assuming, I'm still assuming that we are not only dealing with general public, but also a reasonably informed public. So somebody, I mean, people who are not completely ignorant. All right. And also because I really doubt these days that um, there are still people who are fully or completely ignorant, okay? I mean, completely illiterate about, any kind of whatever you are dealing with. In any case, so that being the premise, um, um, I'm just reasoning in terms of text. And the way code glosses, for example, what they are doing, okay, they're actually helping whoever they are in terms of readership to actually, understand what they're reading about. So, I mean, if you just think of code glosses, for example, I think they do much of this job. Okay, and so I mean, sort things out when it comes to um, helping audience digest what they read. I mean, read and digest what they're reading about. I think.
Anybody else?
Perhaps one more question for Professor Tessuto on the values of evaluative language, the values expressed, because in pure research, if we can call it pure research, often novelty is regarded as the most important element. Would relevance perhaps be closer to
Irrelevance.
relevance? Is it novelty? Is it relevance? What's the most important value, do you think? In many of your examples, it was relevance seemed to be important.
Right.
Just what's your impression?
So this, yeah. Yeah. Because the thing is, when we are joining these conferences, time is always marching, if you like. So yeah, this one. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's right. Yes. First, this slide, for example, yeah, that is. I mean, I made it quite clear that I mean, affect items. Yeah, things like items like crucial importance, whether or not pre-modified, notable, significantly. I put it in terms of, importance and variations thereof. Okay, and so I think they are quite overlapping, if you like. But if you just look at this set of example, here, for example, writers are trying to focus on the immediate value or use of something, but this value or use of research in that case goes into emphasizing the efficacy or safety of a particular drug or whatever it is, okay? And so that is just one way of emphasizing value. Of course, as I said right at the beginning of my talk, I mean, there are people from the linguistic background talking about relevance in news discourse. They're not even, I mean, agreed on what they want to say, but what comes out of those studies is that relevance is just a kind of catch-up term for them to, you know, look into subtle, nuanced meanings of relevance, originality, significance, or other values. Yeah. But I mean, what I did find is that these writers, my news writers, tend to not only emphasize the significance of research and results themselves altogether, but also originality, primacy, and potentiality of research. Yeah, that it is, I think.
We don't have much time. Yeah, one more.
I have a question for Professor Tenka. You were talking about the podcast, like organized and made by professionals, and I was wondering, like, how do you think the research and the results would change if the podcast, sorry, was held by non-professionals? So, for example, by people who are passionate but don't have, for example, medical degrees or are not in the field.
Because otherwise, it's very because I think that I have to use the mic. Otherwise, I don't think that I can hear. Okay, yeah, I think that. I mean, since we've got insiders here in the AIMA podcast, they're really able to draw the audience's attention really on current issues. Someone who is passionate may maybe focus on things, aspects on in which they are interested. So still here we have really we really have insiders knowledge, and also the AMA has a specific mission, of course, to represent physicians, and so I think that individuals who have a passion for these topics would not be able really to identify aspects that are those that really interest the professional community, and which of course have an impact on patients' life and also issues which are really current as regards public health. So this is my idea, I think, not having looked at other types of podcasts. Yeah, it's true. It's true, yes, because it's quite, I mean, it's not expensive to have a podcast, and organizations, journals are now using them very often, also because this is something that also researchers, practitioners listen to in their found time. So when you're driving, when you're commuting, when you're cooking. So this is also a tool for experts and semi-experts, non-experts, to be updated all the time and really maximize the time that they are available. Okay, so this is really potential, which also organizations, donors are tapping into, because yes, this is something. And also they have discovered that listening to information sometimes also has better retention, so for medical students. So I don't know if I've given you an adequate answer, but that's my idea. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm really sorry we have to go, but I think, yeah. Thank you very much, both of you. If we have other questions, I mean, I have other questions, but again, we are running considerably late now, and I think we are all a bit hungry, so perhaps it's time to, yeah, take the lunch break and